My name is Ghost. I've spent the better part of 2 decades in survival, not as a hobby, not as a lifestyle brand, as a discipline. What keeps people alive when systems fail? What kills them when they were sure they were prepared? And in all of that time, the single most consistent mistake I see is this. People don't understand food, not cooking, not nutrition in the conventional sense. I mean the architecture of a supply that can carry you and the people you're responsible for through whatever comes. The man who taught me to think about this correctly is someone I call the old wolf. The old wolf doesn't waste money on fancy gear. He doesn't spend thousands on freeze-dried meal kits with a 30-year shelf life printed on the label. He walks into an ordinary grocery store, buys ordinary food, and stores it in a way that turns that ordinary food into a supply that could outlast most crises, and in some cases, most lifetimes. I've watched him do this for years. And the first time he explained his logic to me, I thought he was exaggerating. He wasn't. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 11 foods that the old wolf keeps as the foundation of his long-term storage. Foods that don't expire or last so close to forever that the difference doesn't matter. I'll tell you what each one does for your body, what your body actually needs to keep functioning under stress, and exactly how the old wolf stores every single one of them. Let's go. The old wolf calls these the Holy Trinity: salt, sugar, and honey. He stockpiles all three before anything else, before the rice, before the cans, before any of the big-ticket items. Because these three have been keeping food and people alive for thousands of years, long before refrigeration was even a concept. And they share one critical trait. Stored correctly, they do not expire. Not in 5 years, not in 50, not in 3,000. That last number isn't a figure of speech. Archaeologists pulled sealed jars of honey out of Egyptian tombs. 3,000 years old. They tasted it. Still edible, still honey. That's what we're talking about here. Start with salt. Salt is not food in the traditional sense. It's a mineral, sodium chloride. And minerals don't expire because they were never alive. What salt does is dehydrate. It pulls moisture out of anything it contacts, including bacteria. Bacteria need water to reproduce, to survive, to do anything at all. Salt eliminates that water. The bacteria die before they can spoil anything. This is why civilizations have been salting meat and fish for over 8,000 years. It works. It worked before we understood why it worked. It will keep working long after we're gone. The old wolf specifically stocks refined table salt, not fancy sea salt, not pink Himalayan. Refined salt has been processed to remove impurities, which makes it even more stable, more resistant to contamination. He stores it in sealed mylar bags inside buckets in a cool, dry place. Done. No rotation needed, no expiration date to track. Now here's why this matters beyond just flavoring food. Sodium is a critical electrolyte. Your body cannot produce it on its own. It has to come from what you eat. In a survival scenario where you're working hard, sweating under stress, your sodium depletes faster than you think. When sodium gets critically low, your muscles stop contracting properly, including your heart muscle. You get confusion, seizures. It becomes life-threatening. Salt is not a condiment. Salt is a survival item. The old wolf treats it that way. Sugar works differently but achieves the same result. Sugar is what scientists call hygroscopic. It attracts and binds water molecules to itself. When sugar is present in high concentrations, it competes with bacteria for the available water and wins. Every time. Beyond that, sugar has what's called low water activity, a measure of how much free water exists for microbial growth. Below a certain threshold, most bacteria and mold simply cannot survive. Sugar sits well below that threshold. You'll notice sugar hardens over time. Crystals bond together and it becomes a solid block. People see that and think it's gone bad. It hasn't. The crystal structure changed. The chemistry didn't. Break it apart, it's still sugar. Still safe, still indefinitely stored. Wolf keeps granulated white sugar. No brown sugar for long-term storage. The molasses content in brown sugar introduces moisture and makes it less stable. White sugar, sealed mylar, cool and dry. That's it. Your brain runs on glucose. That's not a preference, and that's biology. When your blood glucose drops, cognitive function degrades before anything else. You can't think clearly. You can't make good decisions. In a crisis, bad decisions are fatal. Simple sugars are emergency fuel for your brain. Wolf understands that. And then there's honey, which operates on an entirely different level from the other two. Three separate mechanisms work simultaneously inside every jar. First, extremely low water content, around 17 to 20%. Bacteria need water. Honey offers almost none. Second, acidity. Honey has a pH between 3.2 and 4.5. Most pathogenic bacteria require a neutral or slightly alkaline environment to function. Honey's acidity alone is enough to kill most of them. Third, bees introduce an enzyme called glucose oxidase during production. That enzyme generates hydrogen peroxide inside the honey, a natural, continuous antiseptic built into the food itself. Three independent antimicrobial systems, working at the same time, in every jar. That's why it survived 3,000 years in a tomb, and that's why it will survive 30 years in your storage room without any attention from you. Wolf buys raw honey specifically, not the highly processed supermarket variety. Processing destroys much of the enzyme activity and removes trace vitamins and minerals. Raw honey retains all of it. When it crystallizes, and it will, he sets the jar in a bowl of warm water for an hour. Crystals dissolve. Quality unchanged. Same honey it always was. And here's the angle most people miss. Honey is dual purpose. It's food and it's medicine. Applied to a wound, the hydrogen peroxide content and antimicrobial properties actively prevent infection. In a scenario where antibiotics aren't available, that matters enormously. Wolf keeps extra honey, not just for the kitchen, for the medical kit as well. When the grid goes down, protein is the first thing people run out of. Fresh meat is gone in days, frozen meat dies with the power, and most plant-based protein sources require time to prepare, fuel to cook, and don't deliver complete protein on their own. Canned meat solves all of that at once. Old Wolf's approach to canned goods starts with this: ignore the date on the label. Not because dates don't matter, but because what most people think that date means is wrong. The best by date is the manufacturer's estimate of when the food will be at its absolute peak. Best flavor, best texture, optimal nutrition. It is not the date the food becomes unsafe. It is not the date it spoils. It is not an expiration date in any meaningful sense. The USDA has tested canned goods decades past their printed dates, found them safe. Old Wolf treats that date as a loose flavor guideline and nothing more. The reason canned meat is so stable comes down to the canning process itself. Food is sealed inside an airtight container and subjected to extreme heat, above 240 degrees Fahrenheit, applied under pressure. That combination kills bacteria, kills spores, kills every microorganism that could cause spoilage or illness, including Clostridium botulinum, the organism responsible for botulism, one of the most dangerous foodborne toxins that exists. After that heat treatment, the can is sealed. The interior is a vacuum, no oxygen, nothing alive, nothing that can get in. As long as that seal holds, the food inside is protected indefinitely. Wolf does not open a can without checking it first. Every single time. He looks for dents, specifically on the seams, the top and bottom rims where the lid meets the can body. That's where the seal can fail. A dented seam means potential contamination, and he discards it without debate. He looks for bulging. A can that bulges at the top or bottom is producing gas internally. That means something is alive and growing inside. That can goes in the trash, unopened. And when he opens it, he smells it before he does anything else. The human nose is extraordinarily sensitive to the compounds produced by bacterial decomposition. If something is wrong, you will know before you taste anything. He trusts that sense completely. Protein isn't optional. It's the structural material your body uses to maintain muscle, repair tissue, produce enzymes, run immune function, and regenerate cells. Under stress, physical labor, sleep deprivation, illness, the psychological weight of a crisis, your protein requirements increase, not decrease. Your body under stress is consuming protein faster than normal. When you don't eat enough protein, your body doesn't stop needing it. It starts taking it from somewhere else. from your muscles. It breaks down your own muscle tissue to maintain basic function. Over weeks, that becomes visible. Over months, it becomes dangerous. Wolf keeps canned chicken, beef, pork, and fish. He diversifies by type deliberately, because flavor fatigue in a long-term scenario is real. And if you dread every meal, you start eating less, and eating less compounds all the other problems. Researchers at Brigham Young University stored white rice in sealed containers at room temperature and tested it after 30 years. It retained 95% of its nutritional value. 30 years. Room temperature, 95%. Wolf read that study before he stored his first bucket of rice. He hasn't questioned rice as a foundation food since. Most people know rice lasts a long time. Most people don't know that brown rice and white rice are completely different situations. Brown rice keeps its outer bran layer intact. That bran contains natural oils. Those oils go rancid. Under normal storage conditions, brown rice is unusable within 6 to 12 months. In a sealed Mylar bag, maybe 18 months to 2 years. That's it. White rice has the bran removed during milling. No bran means no oils. No oils means no rancidity. The trade-off is slightly less fiber, slightly fewer nutrients in the bran itself. The gain is a shelf life that extends from months to decades. For long-term storage, Wolf stocks white rice exclusively. There's no debate on this for him. The setup Wolf uses is specific and consistent. Mylar bags as the inner layer, oxygen absorbers placed inside before sealing. The sealed bags go into food-grade 5-gallon buckets with locking lids, and those buckets sit in the coolest, darkest area he has. The oxygen absorbers are the critical element most people skip. They remove the residual oxygen from inside the bag after it's sealed, creating the same low-oxygen environment the canning process creates. Without oxygen, insects cannot survive their full life cycle, and oxidation stops. The rice stays in stasis. Your brain alone requires approximately 120 grams of glucose per day to function at baseline. Under stress, under physical exertion, that number goes up. When you don't consume enough carbohydrates, your body shifts into an emergency state. It begins converting fat into ketones to fuel the brain, a functional but inefficient process that causes mental fog, fatigue, and irritability. If fat stores run out, it starts burning protein from muscle. Rice provides clean, efficient, rapidly available calories. High glycemic index, which in a survival context means fast energy when you need it. And at 95% nutritional retention over 30 years, it's the most efficient caloric storage option on this list per dollar spent. Pasta is the item Wolf says most people understore. They buy a few boxes from the grocery store and consider it done. But there's a massive gap between grocery store pasta, 2 to 3 years on the shelf, and properly stored pasta, which reaches 25 to 30 years. Most people never close that gap. Wolf always does. Pasta is made from durum wheat, a hard, dense variety with a protein content of 12 to 14%. That protein structure makes it chemically stable over time in a way that softer wheat varieties simply aren't. Combined with an extremely low moisture content, typically 12% or less after drying, and you remove both primary triggers for spoilage, available water and microbial opportunity. Sealed in Mylar with oxygen absorbers, at consistent cool temperatures away from light, pasta essentially stops aging. Wolf makes a point about pasta that goes beyond nutrition, and it took me a while to fully appreciate it. In a prolonged crisis, monotony becomes a serious problem. If you eat the same thing every day, you start to lose your appetite for it. You eat less. Your nutrition suffers. Your energy drops. Your mood deteriorates. Pasta exists in dozens of shapes: spaghetti, penne, rigatoni, macaroni, rotini. The same sauce over spaghetti one night and over penne the next feels like a different meal. It's a small thing, but in a long-term situation, small things compound. Wolf stocks multiple shapes deliberately. It's not about variety for comfort's sake. It's about maintaining the will to eat enough. That's a survival calculation. Pasta delivers a medium glycemic index, slower sugar release than white rice, which means more sustained energy over several hours rather than a spike and crash. When you need to stay alert for an extended period, standing watch, making decisions, working through a problem, that steady energy matters. Wolf understands this and treats pasta as his daytime work, fuel food and rice as his rapid energy option. It also carries more protein than rice, around 6 grams per 100 grams cooked, and contributes meaningful amounts of B vitamins including folate, which your body needs for cell production and neurological function. Beans and rice. You've heard the combination your entire life. You probably think of it as a budget meal, a student meal, something people eat when they can't afford better. Wolf thinks of it differently. He thinks of it as the most nutritionally complete pairing in long-term food storage, and he's right about that on a biochemical level. Your body requires 20 different amino acids to function. It can synthesize 11 of them internally. The remaining 9, called essential amino acids, must come from your food. Your body cannot make them. If they're not in your diet, you develop deficiencies. Rice is relatively high in methionine but low in lysine. Beans are high in lysine but low in methionine. Combined, you get all 9 essential amino acids from plant sources. Together, beans and rice form a complete protein equivalent to meat. That's not an approximation. That's biochemistry. This is why cultures that had no access to reliable meat supplies, across Asia, across Latin America, across the Middle East, independently arrived at legume-grain combinations as dietary staples. They didn't know the amino acid science. They knew it worked. Dried beans stored in sealed mylar bags with oxygen absorbers last 30 years and beyond for safety. After about 10 years, the texture starts changing. They get harder, require longer soaking, take more fuel to cook fully. But the nutritional content and food safety hold. Wolf's rule on beans is simple. Before you seal them, make absolutely certain they are completely dry. Not surface dry, completely dry throughout. Any residual moisture in the bag is a growth environment for mold. Press individual beans between your fingers. If they yield at all, they're not ready to seal. Here's the nutrition angle. Wolf emphasizes that most people never think about until it's too late. The majority of long-term storage foods, rice, pasta, canned goods, are low in dietary fiber. And when you suddenly shift to a low-fiber diet, your digestive system doesn't adapt quietly. It stops working the way it should. Constipation in a survival scenario is not a minor inconvenience. It becomes debilitating. It affects your ability to function, your pain levels, your sleep, your mood. And when blood sugar becomes erratic from lack of fiber, your energy and cognition go unstable with it. Beans contain around 8 to 9 grams of dietary fiber per 100 grams cooked. They are the fiber anchor of Wolf's storage plan. They keep everything else working the way it should. This is the category Wolf says most people skip, and it's the one that gets them into trouble first. People focus on calories, on protein, on macronutrients. They load up on rice and beans and canned meat, and they think they're covered. They're not. Not without vitamins and minerals. Scurvy, vitamin C deficiency, killed more sailors than storms, pirates, and warfare combined during the age of exploration. Not from starvation, from the absence of one vitamin. Symptoms start within 4 to 6 weeks of zero vitamin C intake. Fatigue, joint pain, bleeding gums. Within a few months, open wounds that won't heal, teeth loosening and falling out. It progresses to internal hemorrhage. It is a brutal way to die from something that a single line prevents. Night blindness, from vitamin A deficiency. Severe fatigue and nerve damage from B vitamin deficiencies. Muscle cramps and cardiac arrhythmia from potassium deficiency. Iron deficiency anemia that leaves you too weak to function. All of these are preventable. All of them come from neglecting the category most people skip: fruits and vegetables. The canning process preserves the vast majority of minerals and many vitamins. Vitamin C and some B vitamins degrade gradually over years, but a significant and useful amount remains for well past the best-by date. Wolf's approach to canned goods dates. He treats the label date as a flavor guide. A properly sealed, undamaged can from years past that date is still nutritionally meaningful food. The USDA confirms this. The science supports it. Wolf stocks canned vegetables and fruit by color, not by personal preference, because different colors correspond to different micronutrient profiles. Orange and red, carotenoids, beta-carotene, vitamin C. Think tomatoes, pumpkin, sweet potato. These become vitamin A in your body. critical for vision, immune function, skin integrity. Dark green, folate, iron, vitamin K. Spinach, green beans, asparagus. Folate is required for cell reproduction. Every new cell your body makes needs it. Yellow and pale, potassium, B vitamins, manganese. Corn, chickpeas, wax beans. He wants representation across the color spectrum so that micronutrient coverage is as complete as possible. And he rotates the stock constantly. Oldest cans get used in everyday cooking, replaced immediately. The supply is always fresh relative to itself. This is the one that surprises people when they see Wolf's shelf. Bottles of vodka, grain alcohol, whiskey. And his reasoning for stocking it has almost nothing to do with drinking. High-proof spirits, anything above 40% alcohol by volume, are self-preserving. Ethanol at high concentrations denatures proteins in bacterial and viral cells. It destroys their structure before they can function. Nothing can live in it. Sealed properly, high-proof alcohol has an indefinite shelf life. Once opened, oxidation slowly changes the flavor profile over years. But for every practical purpose, medical use, disinfection, utility, it remains completely effective indefinitely. Wolf buys it, puts it on the shelf, and does not think about it again. In a grid-down scenario where pharmacies are inaccessible and medical supplies are limited, the ability to properly clean and sterilize a wound is the difference between a minor injury and a life-threatening infection. At 60 to 70% alcohol concentration, which vodka and many spirits reach, alcohol is a clinical-grade antiseptic. The same mechanism that kills bacteria in the bottle kills bacteria in an open wound. Wolf keeps vodka specifically for medical use because it has no flavor additives, no color, no additional compounds. It's clean ethanol and water. That's exactly what you want for a wound. Beyond wound care, sterilizing surgical tools if it comes to that. Cleaning surfaces to prevent infection spread. Extraction of medicinal compounds from herbs, a basic form of tincture making that has been practiced for centuries. And as a fire accelerant in wet conditions where starting a fire is critical. And as a barter currency, historically one of the highest value trade goods in any post-disruption economy. Wolf sets his rules for personal consumption before he ever needs them. Not during a crisis, before. His reasoning, impaired judgment in a survival scenario, is a threat. And stress in a prolonged crisis is real and relentless. He doesn't pretend alcohol won't be appealing when things are hard. He just decides in advance what the boundaries are, while his thinking is clear. That's how he approaches most things. Old Wolf calls oats the most underestimated item in his entire storage. Most people buy a canister, toss it in a cabinet, and forget about it. Wolf seals them in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers and plans on 25 to 30 years of shelf life. And then he points to the nutrition label and shows you why they deserve more attention than they get. Rolled oats have the highest protein content of any grain on this list, around 17 grams per 100 grams dry weight. More than rice, more than pasta. From a grain. They also contain a specific type of soluble fiber called beta-glucan that doesn't exist in rice or pasta. Beta-glucan forms a thick gel in your digestive system that slows the absorption of sugars and fats. This stabilizes blood sugar over hours rather than letting it spike and crash. It reduces circulating cholesterol, and it directly activates immune response. Beta-glucan is one of the few dietary components with documented immune-enhancing effects. In a crisis, blood sugar stability is a cognitive performance issue. Erratic blood sugar, the kind you get from eating mostly high glycemic foods like white rice and sugar, creates cycles of mental sharpness, followed by crashes. Irritability, difficulty focusing, poor decision-making. Wolf eats oats in the morning specifically because the beta-glucan keeps his blood sugar stable for 3 to 4 hours. He can work, think, and make decisions without the mental fluctuation that comes from simpler carbohydrate sources. Oats cook faster than rice, faster than beans. They require less water and less fuel to prepare, which in an off-grid scenario translates directly to resource conservation. They can be eaten as oatmeal with whatever sweetener is available, ground into flour for baking, mixed with honey and dried fruit for a dense portable energy food, added to soups as a thickener. The range of applications is wider than most people realize for a single stored ingredient. Wolf stores old-fashioned rolled oats, Not steel cut, not instant. The rolling process stabilizes the natural oils in a way that extends shelf life. Instant oats have been further processed in ways that compromise long-term stability. Old-fashioned rolled oats are the right choice for storage. Fresh milk disappears within days of a grid failure. Dairy is among the first categories to become unavailable. It requires refrigeration, it requires distribution, it requires a functioning supply chain. All of those things are exactly what fails first. Powdered milk fills that gap. Wolf is clear-eyed about it. It doesn't taste the same as fresh milk. He doesn't pretend otherwise, but it carries the nutritional profile of milk and it stores for up to 25 years done correctly. Wolf makes a deliberate choice between non-fat and whole milk powder based on how he plans to use it. Non-fat dry milk lasts longer, potentially 20 to 25 years in optimal storage, because the fat content is essentially zero and fat is what oxidizes over time. Rancid fat ruins the product. Whole milk powder contains fat and therefore has a shorter storage window, typically 2 to 5 years, even in good conditions. But it provides more complete nutrition and better flavor. His solution: he keeps the majority of his supply as non-fat for the long-term baseline, and he rotates a smaller supply of whole milk powder in everyday cooking so it never sits long enough to go bad. Here is the nutritional gap that almost every long-term storage plan has, and almost no one addresses. Calcium. Your body requires between 1,000 and 1,200 milligrams per day for basic function. Rice has trace amounts, pasta has trace amounts, canned meat has minimal amounts. Beans have some, but not nearly enough to meet daily requirements on their own. Without adequate calcium over months, bone density begins declining. Muscle cramps become chronic. Heart rhythm can become irregular. The nervous system loses stability. Powdered milk solves this problem entirely. 100 grams of non-fat dry milk delivers nearly the full daily requirement of calcium in a single serving. It also delivers vitamin D, vitamin B12, riboflavin, potassium, and phosphorus, nutrients that are difficult to source from shelf-stable foods otherwise. Wolf's storage method: Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, sealed inside buckets, kept below 70 degrees Fahrenheit, away from light. Temperature is more important for powdered milk than for most other items on this list. Heat accelerates the degradation of both nutrients and flavor. The uses go beyond drinking. Added to oatmeal in the morning, mixed into soups for creaminess and nutrition. Used in any baking that calls for dairy. Reconstituted and given to children who need consistent calcium for bone development. Wolf doesn't consider it a luxury item. He considers it a nutritional gap filler that nothing else on the list adequately replaces. 11 foods, some of them older than recorded history, all of them proven by time in a way no modern product can match. Wolf's system isn't complicated when you see it laid out. Salt and sugar handle preservation and provide critical electrolytes and fast energy. Honey provides energy, trace micronutrients, and functions as medicine. Canned meat delivers complete protein with zero preparation barrier. White rice and pasta are the caloric foundation, decades of stored energy in sealed bags. Beans add fiber, plant protein, and complete the amino acid picture when combined with rice. Rolled oats bring beta-glucan, stable sustained energy, and the highest protein density of any grain. Canned fruits and vegetables close the vitamin and mineral gaps that everything else leaves open. Alcohol is medicine, utility, and a barter currency that never degrades. And powdered milk solves the calcium problem that every other item on the list ignores. Together, these 11 items form a complete nutritional system that requires no refrigeration, no power, no functioning supply chain. Just sealed bags, oxygen absorbers, and a cool, dark space. Wolf's advice on getting started is always the same. Don't try to build the whole system at once. Start with the first 3: salt, sugar, honey. They're cheap. They're immediately useful, and the act of buying them and storing them correctly builds the habit of thinking this way. One item at a time. One bag at a time. One bucket at a time. The people who come through hard times aren't the ones who had the most money or the best equipment. They're the ones who thought about this before they needed to. If there's something you'd add to this list, something Wolf missed, something that's earned a permanent place in your own storage, put it in the comments. We read everything. Stay prepared.